Hastings.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And this hearing is about transmission, and specifically it was in the stimulus package. But inherent in all of this, or I should say implicit in all of this, is the type of energy that we're going to be transmitting. And the conversation, of course, has been around green energy. Now, for the record, let me say that I'm one that believes we should have as diverse an energy portfolio as we can possibly can. Having said that, let me qualify it by saying I think the best way to do that is incentivize it rather than mandate it or subsidize it. So that's the challenges that you all face that are in that business. But let me ask Mr. Wright and Mr. Corwin, again in the Northwest, because that's what I'm familiar with. And we all know that renewable energies like wind and solar, we wouldn't have any energy today here in Washington, D.C., obviously, because the sun's not shining. I haven't been outside, but there's not much wind, so we wouldn't have much going on here today if we got our energy there. So what you have to have is a base resource, and we're lucky in the Northwest because our base resource is hydro and nuclear specifically. I guess my question specifically, because I alluded to this in my opening question, is where would we be in the Northwest if we didn't have the lower Snake River dams to supplement the intermittent wind, which is predominant in the Northwest? Mr. Wright or Mr. Corwin, either one?
Well, the Snake River dams and the entire Federal Columbia River hydropower system are absolutely essential to maintaining reliability. If you had an all-wind system, you wouldn't be able to maintain reliability. It's that simple, just because the intermittent and random nature of the wind resource. I think this is one of the great things that we are learning as we have this explosion of wind power in our system is how does it actually operate, and it operates differently than we would have thought a couple of years ago. So we are trying to best figure out what resources we need in order to be able to handle all this wind. We actually are now reaching a point where the hydropower system is not big enough to be able to handle the fluctuations of the wind power in our balancing authority. And so our challenge, in addition to maintaining the existing output of that hydropower system, is what resources will we need to add going forward in order to make sure that we do have a reliable electric power system.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Hastings. I would agree with that assessment. Just the four Snake projects are about 3,300 megawatts of capacity, about 1,200 average megawatts, and indeed the whole with those, all of the dams, and the one nuclear plant in the Northwest right now, we're bumping up against the limits of the capacity needed on the federal system. It's a concern to the customers. It's a critical issue in integrating wind and other resources that are more intermittent, as you pointed out. And it's not just, as the conversation was discussing earlier, it's not just a rate issue at that point. How do you allocate the costs? It is an issue of where does the extra capacity come from for the base load or to balance those intermittent resources, and that's one the region needs to work through aggressively over the next couple of years.
Implicit also in that is the talk about the concept of cap and trade. Huge concept. I know it's in the president's budget. So I'd like to ask all of you to comment on cap and trade, and specifically how it would affect the operations that you have. I know my time's running out here, but I would like to ask all of you just to give me a brief summary of how cap and trade would affect your operations. Mr. Meek, start with you and go on down the line.
For us, we have, as you know, our mission's different, and in the fact that we are not a load-serving entity, and that we are a transmission provider. We do serve wholesale. We market wholesale. So I know it's an issue of concern to my customer group, that they are worried about it, but I do not want to speak toward that at this point in time. I'll let Steve or some of the other ones with more expertise speak on that.
Well, the Federal Columbia River Power System starts out with a natural advantage. It's a 90% hydro and one nuclear plant system. We're a non-CO2 emitting system. So the cap and trade proposals, as it directly impacts our current operations, would be minimal. I think the critical question going forward is we have set up a new regime with our customers where they are responsible for load growth, but we will provide the services to the extent that they want them. And to the extent that they turn to us for those load growth services, and we were purchasing resources, then we would have to have the availability of being able to offset whatever carbon costs are associated with those new resources. So it becomes part of the cost of the new resource. And I think that's probably going to be the key place that we'll be engaging in that question.
Let me get off on a bit of tangent. When you have to purchase power, for whatever reason, like for example when we have the spill in August, which you know my position on that, but when you buy that power, it is generally carbon power. Is that correct?
That's a really interesting question that we are struggling to deal with because electrons are not carbon coded.
Right.
There's no way to tell whether an electron that you purchase is directly from a carbon resource unless you buy from a particular identified generating resource.
Right.
And I think one of the great challenges going forward, this has come up a lot in the discussions about the Western Climate Initiative, is to the extent that we have balancing purchases, how would we track them back to the source and be able to identify whether they have carbon, and if so, what offsets would we need to come up with? We don't today have a system that will do that. So that's going to have to
that can lead to another follow-on question, but let me how to identify. But why don't you briefly, if you all would, get my
one of the things that I've admired.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things I've admired about the committee's questions is your concern for customer costs. As you know, huge changes are coming to the electric utility industry related to climate change implications. I would urge you to continue your focus on the implications in terms of what are the consequences in terms of costs for consumers on actions being considered. And with that, maintaining the reliability of the grid. Your great question about, well, how can all of this work with intermittent resources? And there have to be additional resources in play to make it all work, to keep these lights on in Washington, D.C., or anywhere else in the country in terms of major parts of the grid. So your focus, in a sense, is in the right place and must now, as complicated as it's going to be extended to the climate change debate.
Yeah, Tri-State operates a system over almost 4 states. We have 44 members, and as Administrator Wright pointed out, with wind being integrated into the system, they have a different perspective today than they had a couple of years ago. I couldn't tell you we have a real clue what cap and trade system with kind of a market-based costing system, how that would impact our generation dispatch. We can put numbers on it, assume a carbon cost, but when you get down to actually dispatching, what resources are up, how's the wind blowing, what's the market price on Wall Street, I think it'd be very difficult to gauge that in any accuracy. I think you're going to jump into it and your models may all blow up when you find out what reality and what people are doing. I know from a customer perspective, what we would prefer if you put some kind of carbon cost on there is some type of tax-based system where you know the cost and you can factor that into what you are doing.
I'm way over my time here. Yes, I apologize for that. Can I?
You can have another round, Doc. Let me ask some questions and you can hang around.
That's fine. Listen, I do have to go, but I appreciate that.